Alrighty, so today I want to do my Guilty Gear Strive Season 3 kind of general impressions review. We've had the patch for a little over a week at this point, and I've played tons and tons of matches at this point. I've played in tournament a lot as well. And I figured now is a good time to just give my general impressions on how this patch is looking. I like doing general impressions early on because it's always fun to be able to kind of look back at it and see how things change maybe in a month or a couple of months from now. So obviously, because it is still pretty early in the patch, it's literally only been a little over a week, some of my opinions may change over time, but this is just how I'm feeling about things currently, and this is kind of a look at how I feel like the game is going to develop long term, and then we'll see if it's correct. Now, before we get into the video, I do want to know what you over on YouTube think about Season 3 so far. Let me know down in the comments below if you've been enjoying it a lot. How do you feel like your character is faring in Season 3? Do you like the changes they got? Let me know in the comments below. As just a general review of Season 3, just to give you my general vibe, I think Season 3 is really good. I actually really enjoy most of the changes that they made, and I think that this is a great direction to go in with Strive. And I also think that Season 3 is pretty much exactly what we needed. At the end of Season 2, I feel like we were in a situation where people were very burnt out on Guilty Gear. The Season 2 was a good version of the game. It was actually a pretty balanced version of the game, all things considered. But I don't think it changed enough about how the game was played, and it kind of ultimately led us to playing the same version of the game for about 2 years. When it came to Season 3, I felt like we really needed a version of the game that changed things up a lot, but didn't alienate the people that liked the game for what it was either, which is not something that's easy to accomplish. It's very hard to make changes to an existing game that feel impactful and that feel fresh, but don't alienate or turn people away that already played the game, that already liked it. And I feel like they actually hit that balance pretty well for the most part. So with that said, getting into actual specifics of Season 3 that I'm enjoying. The first one is I actually really like the direction that they're going in with the burst gauge. I like that we have essentially a second resource that we have to pay attention to. I'm a big fan of fighting games that have resource management being like one of the main skills in them, right? For reference, like I'm a big fan of Street Fighter 6 having the drive gauge. I think that system's really cool. And just in general, Guilty Gear has always been a series where your management over your tension has always been very important, and is often something that really sets apart the different players, right? Like top players, usually one of the best things they're good at compared to other people is managing the resources. So for me, I really like that they're leaning into that direction of resource management in Guilty Gear. I think there's some problems with the burst gauge, however, that I'm not the biggest fan of. For example, I don't like how they've affected burst regen. I think positive bonus giving burst regen is probably a little bit too strong, and I think it really messes with the game flow of the game a little bit. And just in general, like I feel like tension and burst are being thrown around a little bit too much right now, which diminishes the value of resource management just a little bit. That said, I think the direction of it is good, and kind of just as a general vibe thing with this patch, I expected some things to be off the mark, right? It's hard to get balance on a lot of new mechanics and character changes right the first time. When you're changing this much, things are naturally going to be a little bit out of whack. So I kind of expected some of the system mechanics to be either overtuned or undertuned. I think Wild Assault is really cool in concept. I really like the idea of having this kind of an alternative to tension gauge. You can't do it, or you can't use it in as many ways as you could tension. But I like having conversions, and I like having them more readily available early on in games. Guilty Gear has always had this thing where like characters kind of power scale throughout a match as they get more tension and just more resources in general. Now I feel like the power level at the start of the match has actually gone up a lot, and one of the reasons I like that is because previously with like Season 2, for example, a lot of the characters that were strong, a big reason why they're strong, and this is a general thing in Guilty Gear, is because their conversions were better than most characters. You look at a character like Nago or Happy Chaos, one of the things those characters do is that they convert better than everyone else, and I feel like Wild Assault kind of evens that out a little bit. It's not as big of an advantage as it used to be because kind of everybody converts pretty well now. In terms of the three versions of Wild Assault, I think the balancing on them is a little bit weird. Currently, I think the orange ones are by far the best ones because they're just the best for converting. The extra corner carry on them is really good. The fact that they combo from attack level 2 moves and up is really good. I think the blue one is a fine alternative, but I do think every character would rather have the orange one, but giving the blue one to the more like mix up or resource heavy characters is fine. White Wild Assault I actually think is not good game design. I don't even think they're that good, but I really don't like the game design of them, and I wish they would change them, to be honest. But I do like them going in the direction of giving more uniqueness to certain characters, so having different Wild Assaults is cool, in my opinion. That said, I don't think Wild Assaults are all upside, because while I think evening out character strength with Wild Assault is good. I don't really agree with the idea of homogenizing conversions on a character level to this degree. While some characters getting this is a buff that is very justified, a character like Testament, I think it's very justified that they actually get conversions now. Whereas on the flip side, I feel like characters like Ram and Chip, for example, should not be converting like they do now. And that's just maybe something that they're going to have to look at either by changing those characters individually or maybe just changing how Wild Assault works overall. You know, when it comes to fighting games, this is like a tale old as time at this point, but when you make system changes, they're going to tend to favor the better characters than the worst ones because the better characters just have better tools. So even though Ram and Testament are both characters that benefit from it, Testament, it's like, okay, this is a pretty impactful thing. For Ram, it's like, okay, this is already a top tier character that now is getting something that is filling one of her defining weaknesses from before. But overall, I like Wild Assault, and it's just one of those things that, again, I think they're going to need to patch up over time. With Deflect Shield, I personally think this mechanic is mostly pretty bad. Most of the time people use it, it just doesn't work that well. And even when it does work, really all you're accomplishing is like, okay, we went back to neutral. Something like that, right? You're rarely getting a punish. You're not really changing the tide of the match very much with it. It feels very low impact for how much burst gauge it takes. In comparison to Wild Assault is like this mechanic that, in my opinion, is very overtuned on purpose. It felt very intentional that they wanted it to be as strong as it is. They wanted to make sure Wild Assault was used. They wanted to make sure it impacted the meta. Whereas it felt like with Deflect Shield, they were probably a little bit scared because having a strong defensive mechanic like that universally that is tied to a mechanic you start the game with, if it was strong, it would probably be really unfun. So overall, I like the system changes and I think they're going in a good direction and I think they're very fun, but they do very clearly kind of say to me that like, we're going to need something that patches them up in the future, which I wholeheartedly expected, so I'm not even that surprised. Again, when you add new systems like this, they're pretty hard to get right the first time, even if you know how the game functions. Going into character changes, I actually like this patch a lot on a character level because they did two things that I feel like we've needed for a very long time. They nerfed damage, and this time they actually did it in a way that like feels impactful. They have quote unquote nerfed damage multiple times in Strive, and every time they do it, it always felt like either not impactful or they made enough other buffs to damage output or conversions that it didn't really come up that much. Now I actually feel like the damage is lowered a little bit. Now, when it comes to balance this version, you know, I'm not sure how balanced this version actually is. My initial gut instinct tells me that this version is less balanced than the previous version. And I don't think that's that surprising because, again, when you change a bunch of things, you're going to get it wrong, right? Just naturally, there's going to be things that are out of whack. There's a couple of weird changes in this version, such as I think Potemkin's actually a worse character in this version than he was previously. A character like Anji, I think, is overall weaker than he was last version. He was decent last version, but now I think he's kind of weak. Characters like Zato, I feel like got drastically over nerfed. I do not think Zato is a good character at this point in time. And then on the flip side, there's some stronger characters I feel like got better that didn't really need to. So for example, Ram, the character I play, I feel like she is either the same or slightly better this version, depending on how you want to look at things. And that's a little bit questionable because she was already a pretty strong character. Happy Chaos is another character that, while he did get some nerfs, he also got some things that are net positive for him. And I feel like the system changes are both good and bad for him. But the ways that make him better, I think, are very questionable. I don't like Positive Bonus being such a consistent win condition for a character like him. And they also buffed his zoning again this version. So now whenever he is reloading the gun, he actually gains back concentration instead of loses it. And while it's still not, you know, like Season 1 zoning levels, it's still pretty bad, and I don't know why they made that change, because that's the type of change that makes them dunk on some characters harder than he already did. So characters like, you know, Potemkin and characters like Jacko, Zato, characters like that have really hard times against his zoning, he does even better against them. And there's just other things that I think are weird. Like, I don't really know why they changed Nago in the way they did. I think the high-low thing is just really weird game design, you know? Like, I don't think it makes him better or worse. I think he's mostly about where he was before, but it just doesn't feel good to play against, which is a very common problem in Narcissus games. I feel like they tend to not concern themselves with whether a character is fun to fight against. But overall, I think the character changes are actually in a pretty good direction because they nerfed a lot of very annoying things about characters, right? Like they nerfed Baiken's parry, for example. Baiken parry does less damage. They nerfed Paration on a lot of moves, like I mentioned. They nerf stuff like Ino's dive. They nerf stuff like Nago's 5k. There's a lot of moves that have been very, very potent, and they nerf them this version of the game, and I really like that because when you nerf very potent tools that characters have been using for a while, it forces people to find new strategies and it allows you to buff characters in other directions, which opens up a lot of fun opportunities. Overall, I'm a fan of this version of the game. I think that this patch is going in a great direction. I think it's exactly what we needed after Season 2 for the most part. Mostly just concerned with the fact that some things seemed a little bit overtuned, although I expected them to end up that way. And I think another thing that I'm really curious about is the implementation of new special moves in the future, because they said that we'll be getting new specials throughout the season. I am really curious and almost concerned how that is going to shake up the game over time, and I hope that they don't just add new moves, but they actually like patch the game up every time they add new moves. Because, you know, if a character like Nago, for example, gets a crazy strong move in his current iteration, he would probably end up too good. So I really hope that they consider that when it comes to adding new moves. And in general, I really hope that in the future we are not left on the same version of the game for too long, because I think at this point it's already immediately obvious that there are some problems with how overtuned some things are. Yeah, those are just my thoughts on Season 3. Of course, again, I want to know if you're having fun with Season 3 and how you feel about it for your character. If you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subbing to the channel. It really helped me out and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.